So we'll just start by passing things over to Bessa to introduce the group and your presentation, and please just take it away.
Thank you. Good evening. This is about the Hassan Diab story, Strategies for Public Support, and we thank SASA and your members for your interest and giving us some time. So today what we'll do is go through some the Hassan Diab story, how and ways in which we support Hassan by the support committee, general public supporters, and how you can take action. So basically we'll do some slides and videos and have 2 points for Q&A. So you can type into the chat or raise your hand to speak. So who are we? Well, Joe and I are retired professors from the Department of Psychology, and we'll be presenting tonight. Other contributors who are present are Maeve Mahan, who's retired prof again at Carleton in the Department of Legal Law and Legal Studies, and she's an expert in extradition law, and she's available for questions, as is Michelle Weinroth, who created the video that you'll see towards the end. So who is the committee? Well, there are about 15 of us. We meet regularly every other week. We used to meet in person, but now we're on Zoom. It's made up of lawyers, academics, concerned citizens, and students. And then supporting us is an extensive network of supporters, including concerned citizens and activists and organizations and unions and things like that. So we have lots of a very extensive network across the country. And the website, again, is justiceforhassandiab.ca.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Hassan Diab. I'm a Canadian citizen, a sociology scholar, and I live in Ottawa with my wife Rania Tfaili and our children Jad and Jenna. I'd like to tell you my story if you haven't heard it yet. In 2008, France requested my extradition for my alleged involvement in the 1980 bombing of a synagogue in Paris. I was arrested by the RCMP. The standard for extradition is so low that Canada hands citizens over based on the flimsiest of evidence that would not be accepted in a Canadian criminal trial. Extradition law allows unsworn allegations to be presumed reliable and to go unchallenged, and places the burden to prove that any evidence is manifestly unreliable on the person being accused. At the same time, the accused is forbidden from calling evidence in their defense. It is so difficult to defend oneself that lawyers have a joke. There's only one question in an extradition hearing: window seat or aisle. The case against me stood on unreliable, unsourced intelligence. Experts testified about France's troubling history of using intelligence obtained through torture in terrorism trial. Multiple handwriting experts testified the handwriting evidence implicating me was deeply flawed. Some of the samples used for comparison even belonged to my ex-wife. The extradition judge, Robert Moranger, said that the evidence against me
seems illogical
and was
convoluted, very confusing, with conclusions that are suspect.
He added that France presented
a weak case,
and
the prospects of conviction in the context of a fair trial seem unlikely.
Justice Moranger said that he couldn't consider the expert evidence on the unreliability of the handwriting analysis. What? Even though I should have been freed since we had shown the evidence was manifestly unreliable, the judge disagreed and said he felt forced by the law to order my extradition. The Court of Appeal said that the judge was wrong in not ruling on the evidence, but they wouldn't intervene with his decision. The Supreme Court refused to hear my appeal without reason.
Every single level of Canadian courts failed Hassan.
The next day, I was extradited to France.
Although my daughter and I were promised that we could see my husband before he was extradited, they moved him very early in the morning and we were unable to say goodbye or bring him money or clothes.
Although the law stipulates that Canadians are only to be extradited to face trial, I spent more than 3 years in prison in mere solitary confinement and without charge, while the French judges were investigating my case. The French investigative judges found that the fingerprint comparison was a key reason to release me. They described the unsourced intelligence as full of contradictions and inaccuracies, and they verified that I was not even in France when the bombing occurred. The judges ordered my release 8 times, but the prosecutors blocked it every single time. The investigative judges finally closed their investigation with no charges, so I was released and returned to Canada in January 2018. The French prosecutors have appealed this decision. I was finally reunited with my family, including my son, who was born while I was detained in France. I missed the first 3 years of his life. My dad died a few months before my release. He would never know that I would ever be free. I want to thank my wife Rania, the Hassan Diab Support Committee, my lawyers, and all the people who have supported me over the years, without whom I wouldn't be back home today. But the fight is not over.
It's been 40 years since the bomb exploded, 12 years since Hassan Diab was arrested, 3 years since he was released due to lack of evidence, just hours since it started all over again.
The decision of the French Court of Appeal today is the continuation of a long odyssey of injustice.
Diab isn't speaking today, but has said the toll has been enormous.
My physical and mental health deteriorated, and most importantly, I missed the birth of my son and more than 3 years of my children's lives.
Diab's lawyers have appealed this to the French Supreme Court. They don't believe he's at risk of being extradited again unless the Supreme Court rules against them. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
We're getting reaction now to the breaking news that Professor Hassan Diab, Lebanese-Canadian Professor Hassan Diab, will be required to stand trial in France. Just in, the support committee for Hassan Diab has released a scathing statement on the court decision, saying the court misrepresented evidence, misstated facts, and engaged in troubling analysis based on unfounded speculation. Diab's lawyer in Canada, Don Bain, also included a statement saying the travesty of justice continues despite clear evidence of Diab's innocence. He says this shows how political pressure trumps justice and calls on Canada's Prime Minister to put an end to what he calls a miscarriage of justice. David Cochran has been following the Diab story extensively for years and has more on the decision.
Yeah, Heather, we haven't yet seen the decision. Diab's lawyers are going through it now in their law offices in Paris, but I've been speaking with Hassan Diab's family who told me that they've been told their appeal has been rejected. And as you can imagine, this is a devastating and disappointing day for them. It came down today. Hassan Diab's also been ordered to pay 2,500 euros in legal fees to cover the cost for the civil party. And now France needs to decide whether it will seek Hassan Diab's extradition a second time from the government of Canada, or will it simply try him in absentia to have the trial and then seek his extradition should he be convicted in French courts. Even if Hassan Diab had won this today, Heather, it wouldn't be over because it would have sent it back to a lower court where they could have heard yet another argument on the need to send him to trial. So it just felt to Diab and his supporters, which there's quite an extensive network which has supported him financially and emotionally and legally throughout the years. They just felt like this would never end. Well, the argument to send him to trial certainly carried the day in France. So he's 67 years old now. He has 2 young kids who've never known a day where their father wasn't either under investigation or in a French prison. And now they're going through this again. I mean, the view from Diab and his supporters is that this is essentially a political trial. Don Bain last week said that they are seeking to put an innocent man on trial to scapegoat him for this crime. France has pursued this doggedly, and today they got a decision that puts quite frankly, the government of Canada in a difficult position. Because if you remember, Heather, when Diab was released, the Prime Minister said quite explicitly what happened to Hassan Diab should not have happened. And now they're in a situation where a G7 ally and a NATO partner could be once again requesting Hassan Diab's extradition to France.
Okay, it's really important to kind of look at the context post 9/11, which even though the Copernicus bombing was in 1980, of course, Hassan was not brought into this until well after 9/11. In Canada, of course, Islamophobia went on the rise, and this was a lot due to the fear of terrorist attacks. The RCMP and SASA became what I would call kindly overzealous in their pursuit of people, of possible terrorists. There were multiple arrests of Muslims, very often with nothing more than guilt of association. In one case, a man was arrested because his mechanic for his car was considered to be a terrorist suspect. So this was the kind of thing that went on. They also, along with arresting many people, if people they thought might be terrorists went over to the countries where they were born, the SASA would get them arrested there and even tortured and asked questions. So it was a very difficult time, and public opinion was always strong for conviction. In other words, if the RCMP suggested somebody was a terrorist, it was more or less assumed they were. This all in the context of 9/11. In France, it was probably even worse. Islamophobia was running very strong, and they were actually enduring some terrorist attacks there. The terrorism courts were actually being criticized internationally for being overzealous in terms of anybody that went in front of the court would tend to be found guilty. And public opinion would be very strong for conviction. In addition, there were support groups for the victims of the attack who were lobbying strongly about this, and so it was basically a very, very difficult time. It's kind of interesting to look at what one should expect when a cause is unpopular. And we can kind of take Hassan's case as a good example. Early on, in a case like this, where everybody's presuming guilt, it takes a lot of courage to speak out. And I want to particularly applaud the Department of Sociology and their chair at the time, Peter Goss, who did speak out and said they knew Hassan and they didn't believe this stuff. And when that happens, there's a lot of attacks. You're attacked by the trolls that come out on the internet, indignant citizens. There were efforts made to get Peter dismissed as chair of the department. And I think for people who are early on like that, one thing that hurts a lot is that they aren't believed or listened to by people you know and think would support you. This is why a support group becomes so important, because that means no one is alone and you can set clear goals and get out the message and begin to turn things around. As you go through this process, you do see signs of success if you're lucky. You begin to see in the media in particular your own message replacing the message of guilt. The size of the support group grows and grows. You see fewer of these trolls. They're still around. They even came out today with this new press release, but fewer and fewer. You get some political support, some politicians being willing to support you. You get more and more favorable media stories and op-eds by people who care about social justice. On the other hand, reaching the goal can take a long time. So that's that one. Okay.
So there have been personal stresses on Hassan and financial stresses. So he lost his freedom. He was 3 months in the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center and then released with very strict bail conditions. So he had to wear an electronic bracelet, which cost him personally $2,000 a month for his basically he became his own jailer, and that lasted 3.5 years, from 2011 to 2014 when he was extradited. So he couldn't even go out of his own house without a surety. So a handful of people in the support committee became sureties. So even to go downstairs and do the laundry in his apartment building, he had to have somebody accompany him. And so his wife, in effect, was one of his jailers. There were restrictions on travel, of course, and there was no family life. Once he was extradited to France, and in a French prison, there was no family life. The never-ending process of being investigated in France went on for 3 years while he was in jail there. Financially, there were lawyers' fees. He lost his employment at Carleton. They fired him. So what happened to innocent until proven guilty? The bail amounts were huge. As we mentioned, the prison expenses, he had to pay his lawyers in France and his lawyers here. And the family traveled to visit Hassan in France a number of times, and all of those were expenses. So the current situation, as was mentioned, there will be a trial. This has just been announced. It'll be in April of 2023, so next year. And why is this happening? Islamophobia is huge in France and growing. And because it's a very political issue in France, there's a need for a solution. A number of uncertainties. So will he be extradited? We don't know. And if not, he will be tried in absentia. And he is likely to be found guilty. The certainty, certainly, he's likely, as I said, he's likely to be found guilty given past experience. And if so, he will end up on the international no-fly list as a convicted terrorist. In Canada, supporters, we want the government to protect Hassan and to say that they will not extradite him. They also need to fix the extradition law, which is badly flawed. The government is unwilling to act there. They say, well, we follow the rule of law. And this is an excuse which is definitely debunked by the lawyers. The reality, also political reality, is that France is an ally, and we don't want to anger them in any way or go against them. There's a continuing need for pressure. Any questions so far?
There might be a couple on chat. See what's on chat.
I don't see any questions on the chat so far, or see any hands raised. Okay.
Right. So.
You need to go to the next slide.
Yeah, I was having trouble doing that for some stupid reason. Here we go.
What have we done to engage the public? So what follows are some ways, what things we have done to engage the community and the public, and actions that members of the public can take.
Yeah, yeah. One of our big tasks, of course, is raising public awareness that Hassan is indeed innocent and how he's being mistreated. So the kinds of things we did starting right away was we started to build social media lists. We had support groups on Facebook, and we had a email list where we send out regular bulletins to people to keep them up to date and let them know what's happening. And we have probably thousands of people involved in that way. We have had demonstrations of all different kinds and stripes. The one you see in the picture here, we're in front of the Supreme Court because we know they're coming down with a decision, our Canadian Supreme Court, who refused to hear the case, which shocked us because we thought it was a case that required intervention. Yeah, we're always developing background documents. It can be flyers. It's information of all different kinds. We can put out letter templates that people can click and send a letter to the PM. We can always doing website updates, sending stuff out on social media. We've done petitions, getting media like op-eds and things like this. And this is all very important to keeping the case in people's minds. So press conferences, we just had one today, as we've mentioned. And we also had a press release that went with that. We did a lot to engage national organizations such as Amnesty International and various civil liberties associations, the unions. And they could help us by passing to their email lists what we were passing to our email list. And we were always in our emails asking supporters for help. And what the public does, our public supporters, is they keep informed. They read our little updates. They attend demonstrations, and when we ask them to write or call politicians with a particular message, we get quite a lot of response. And we have people spreading the word, both personally and through social media. Personally is always particularly useful if you just start talking to your friends and so on about the case. That can help a lot. One of our big tasks has always been the fundraising because, as Bessa pointed out, there's lots and lots of need for funding. Hassan went through his savings probably before the trial even started. And Don Bain, his lawyer, has worked pro bono ever since. But that doesn't mean he didn't have a lot of expenses here, because of course you heard about the bracelet, and also he had to pay for the expert witnesses who would come to say that the handwriting analysis and so on was bad, and that cost thousands of dollars. And he had to pay for he had to pay as well for special lawyers that did other kinds of work. So it was a lot of money. And so we had these events in church basements, community centers. We had house parties. A member of the committee would invite a lot of people to come to the house parties. And especially later on, after we had a really great group of financial supporters, we could just sometimes put out an online plea and say, we need 3,000 for this or whatever. And we tend to get it rather quickly. We've had very generous supporters. In the parties that we did, especially initially, we made quite a big deal out of them. There would be food, there would be games for people to break the ice and get to know each other. Speakers, usually Don Bain being one of them, and Hassan or maybe Rania. Raffles, silent auctions. It was made into quite a festive occasion. And the funds were only spent for two reasons. The first was to pay the 2,000 per month bracket for Hassan. And we did this with the 100 for Hassan campaign, which did not mean $100. It meant 100 people each donating $20 a month and pledging to that. And this was an initiative of Professor Aaron Doyle, who was in your department. So that was really appreciated, and it carried on through the whole period before he was extradited. And then we had the horrible legal bills, not only here, but in France. But the fundraising helped with more than just raising money. It was a great way to recruit new supporters and to develop social connections. And this next slide kind of shows you the kind of thing that went on. There was food, there's Hassan. He did his own cooking as long as he was out of jail. He even had to have surgery on a finger because he'd done too much chopping. The speakers, there's Don Bain giving one of his many wonderful explanations to the crowd. This is a pretty typical group that we would have at a fundraiser like this. And there's some of the entertainment going on. So it was a big deal, and it helped a lot to grow our movement as well as to get the funds that everybody needed. You're on, Bessa?
Sorry,
Yeah.
unmute myself. So how did we build a case? We documented the miscarriage of justice, and Don Bain on the website, if you'll have some time to look at his very detailed piece about the step-by-step miscarriage of justice. We explained flaws in the extradition treaty, which, by the way, goes back to the 70s, so it really needs an update.
80s.
Is it 80s?
Yeah.
Anyway,
89.
a long time.
Yeah.
We held there were two workshops about the extradition in Halifax, the laws and the need for changes in 2018, 2019. And we've been lobbying for political support. So MPs, PM, senators, prominent individuals, groups, and organizations for political support. So communication, we need to be ready. Best case or worst case. Best case is that he's not found guilty in France. The worst case is that he will be. And so we need to be ready for both of those outcomes. Press conferences, as Joe said, we held one this morning. So check out the website, it's on there. Use of social media, op-eds, press coverage, and this what we've mentioned. And providing concrete activities for people to do. So people can sign petitions, write letters, postcards. There are postcards at Octopus Books. Many of you will know that. Or there's one online. And all you have to do is sign the postcard, and it doesn't even cost anything to send it because it's to the Prime Minister. And it asks for him to not extradite Hassan again. We talk with friends and organizations. During elections in the past and upcoming, we'll plant questions to candidates about this, and we've held demonstrations. Our main tools have been supporter emails and social media, as we've mentioned, and strategies are event-driven, and we provide choices. So from clicking, just something as simple as clicking on something, or asking people to write letters or or call their MP or senator. So here's a couple of examples of displays of support. On the left was a demonstration in front of the courthouse, and those are the ragey grannies. And on the right, as Joe mentioned, that was a gathering at the Supreme Court when we heard the decision that the court would not hear his case. And it was a very sad moment when he, in fact, was extradited the next morning. Another strategy that we've used is reaching people of influence. Who and how to reach them? Well, we're using supporter contacts to reach MPs, senators, lawyers. We have a letter signed by 118 lawyers across the country demanding a change to the extradition law and that Hassan not be extradited. Union leaders have been helpful, celebrities, and amongst our many supporters, it's amazing how many people have contacts with any one of these influential people. And they have written articles, letters, contributed to social media, and they talk to their peers. All of that's helpful.
Okay, just a little bit about the role of the support committee. From the beginning, our main goals have tried to get Hassan's life back, and that means all the way to an understanding of his innocence and getting all this legal stuff off his back. We had to build up support and continue always to work on that and provide financial help. We have ongoing support throughout the ordeal. When he first got out on bail here in Canada, he was under strict house arrest. As Bessa mentioned, he couldn't even go down and do laundry by himself. So some of us as sureties who also had promised a lot of money if he were to skip bail, but some of us also operated as people who could take him out of his room, out of his house. We were approved to do that. So for example, just about 3 times a week, I would ride my bicycle along while he jogged on the Rideau River. And if he was not allowed to stay alone overnight, so if Rania had to go somewhere, one of us would have to stay with him. Once he had gone to prison, of course, what was going on had to change. Basically, we would write letters, send cards, even send books. You were allowed to send paperbacks, but not hardbacks. The Guardian Weekly was sent to him. And here in Ottawa, many of us would go on outings with Rania and the kids and try to support her in any way we could. So there was a big personal link to all this, as well as the legalistic ones. The top little picture there was we actually went to the French embassy and stayed outside. And those are that's a security guard way on the left, French security guard. We never did, I think, get to talk to the ambassador, but I do think a representative came out, but things like that we would do. And the bottom one was the night Hassan was coming back on the airplane, and it was after midnight, but quite a few of us came out. We're standing in the airport watching the escalator where he's gonna come down. You can see Rania and the children, the flowers and so on, up in the front there. It was a very emotional time, a good time. So what's next? Well, as we know, he's facing trial in France, April 2023. Our job is to keep pressure on the Canadian government to speak up for Hassan. We're always looking for ways to break through in France too, but that has not been very fruitful. So we had the press conference today. And we're asking that the government say no to extradition now and suspend the extradition treaty with France. You may not know, but even though we have an extradition treaty with France, France would not extradite their citizens for anything, and yet we eagerly seem to extradite ours. Extradition is a bit of a hot topic. There's been lots of cases, but probably the most famous was the Ning Wahu's case that involved the two Michaels. And so there's an increase in public pressure to reform the Extradition Act so that we won't have the kind of problems that we saw there and in Hassan's case. And we do have many lawyers pushing for that reform. Yet the government is stalling. So that's kind of where we are with that. So we will be trying to do our best to keep the pressure on. Waiting periods can be kind of hard, but right now we're waiting to learn things. Will France try to extradite Hassan again for the trial? We tend to think not, but we have to be ready to react in any case. This means that even before we hear, we've prepared a media release and thought about how to have a press conference and interviews in the case that we do get an announcement. We always try to be ready for these opportunities to get in the news. And the big thing is to really keep the pressure up.
So how can you get involved? There's a new support club on campus founded by two grad students from sociology at Carleton named Mary Gabra and Nick Haynes. Unfortunately, neither of them could be here today to announce themselves. So they're called the Hassan Diab Student Awareness Group. And they're dedicated to supporting the Hassan Diab Support Committee, raising awareness, bringing attention to the injustice of it all, and support whatever ongoing efforts we have. And what can you do? You can join the club, and faculty and student signatures are needed to register as a club at Carleton. And there's the form. We will be posting these slides so that you can pick up these things from there. And if you're interested in joining the club, please email Nick and Mary at hassandiabstudentawareness@gmail.com.
Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Weinroth. She's a retired lecturer at Ottawa U's School of English department, I should say. She is the author of the video we're about to see. Do you want to say a few words, Michelle?
Okay, I'll be brief. The video was originally produced actually out of a poem that I wrote in 2016 called Bring Him Home, Sir. And it was at the time that Hassan was still in prison. But in 2018, he was actually released and came home, thankfully. But his nightmare returned in January of 2021 when the French Court of Appeal reversed the release order of 2018 and ruled that he stand trial. It was in April of 2021 that I decided to do something rather unorthodox. I adapted the poem written in 2016 and converted it into a video, one that I hoped would inspire people to write letters to the Prime Minister demanding that he rescue Hassan from the claws of the French judiciary. And for a time, the video proved fairly successful in April 2021, but over time it needed to be upgraded and updated to keep up with Hassan's evolving case. So in May of that year, when much to our horror, France's top court upheld the appeals court's decision, I decided to turn the video into a kind of lyrical exhortation directed specifically at Justin Trudeau himself. So the video became a kind of letter framed as an audiovisual piece that calls on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to act now. And it was conceived in the hope that alongside the many letters and press conferences and op-eds and other appeals to the government, something creative might grab the attention of parliamentarians and staff and hopefully move Justin Trudeau and his ministers to act now in response to Hassan's dire situation. So fundamentally, the message is to say, as Joe and Bessa have, do not extradite Hassan a second time. I think I'll leave it at that because I'm hoping that the video speaks for itself.
Okay, we're going to let it roll. I hope. Wow.
Any questions, comments?
I think that when it comes through the Zoom, I think it's happened before, that it technically doesn't work in the same way as when you get it directly from YouTube. Did you notice that? That
No.
the visuals actually are truncated? Whereas if you do, I think it's a Zoom thing, that if you have to upload it through Zoom, that it actually truncates the images, whereas if you get it directly from YouTube, then it's smooth. I don't know if you've noticed that. Do you notice that?
I really didn't, but I wouldn't be
That's okay.
surprised.
I think it's a bit like, photocopying something again and again, and it gets more and more
Yeah.
faint. So that's, I just wanted to say that, so people understand that actually the original, if you look on YouTube, it actually is a smooth line. The sentences don't repeat themselves on screen, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think maybe when I see it directly on PowerPoint, I'm not getting that same thing that you are.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, could be. It
Maybe
may
it
be,
might
as you
be.
say, the zooming feature. Yeah.
I don't know, how did the other people see it? Did they see that the sentences are replicated?
They were like fading into one another. So I'm not sure if that's what you
Did they
mean.
repeat themselves or the same sentence each time, but kind of double? Did you see?
No.
No, it wasn't double.
Okay, then I must be my computer.
Good. Yeah, but if you want to send us the link to that video, then we can also include that in the description.
It's on the introductory slide, I think.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oops. See if I get back to that.
Felicity.
There it is.
Michelle has done a fact sheet, which is attached, I think, which will be sent to you, Felicity.
She already has it.
I have it. Yeah.
Okay, and that is a very thorough rundown of the whole thing that we talked about. So people can go into much more depth if they have the time and wish to do that.
Yep. All right.
So thank you for your interest in the case, and join us if you, join the student group, which is Mary and Nick are starting, and we look forward to working with them.
Yeah. And even if you don't have the time to join them, it'd be great if you'd put signatures out there so that the club can get official recognition. I guess there's some perks to that.
Yeah, we will definitely circulate that within our social media as well.
Great. I don't know how many they need. Do you?
No.
I think it's about 12, but the more the better.
Yeah, exactly.
I did have a question that I asked in the chat earlier, but when you mentioned the postcard that's available at Octopus Books earlier, I remember I had signed a physical postcard a while back, but is there a digital version of it as well, or does that fall under the petition? Or
there is a digital version that you can find on the Hassan Justice for Hassan Diab website. I think I'm checking it out.